This is the Camp Iron Mountain Podcast, a place to learn about U.S. military history as told through the stories of service members, military units, and supporting civilians. Join us as we work to preserve their memories for future generations. And we'd like to welcome another fantastic guest today, Lieutenant Colonel Wendy Tokach. Wendy's an active... Hi. What's up? So just want to give a little bit of background on you. Wendy is a active duty Army officer. Started off as an enlisted soldier in the North Dakota National Guard before becoming an officer. She's been on multiple operational assignments throughout her career, including 4 separate deployments, 3 to Iraq and 1 to Bosnia. Her most recent assignments have also included a lot of what the Army calls force generation units, which is bringing new soldiers and officers into the Army. So she served time as a small group instructor or a small group leader for the Basic Officer Leaders Course and Captain's Career Course. She was a professor of military science for an ROTC battalion. And in her current job, she is a battalion commander for the 787th Military Police Battalion, 1-station unit training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. At the time of this recording, fresh off the slopes of Colorado, we'd like to welcome once again Wendy Tokach. Hey, what's going on?
Well, yeah, like you said, kind of recovering from taking some leave because, as you know, when you get back to work, it's totally crazy. So enjoyed my time off, but I'm actually kind of glad to be back to work. So my XO did a great job while I was out.
As XO should do.
Yes, I didn't have to worry about too much. He promised I did not have to check my my military email unless he called me to tell me that. And he only actually called me once, and that was my last day before coming back, was just to check in before I came back to work. So I thought that was fantastic.
That
So
is. That
I
means
have
you're a good boss. That's great.
means I have an iron major working hard for me. That's great. So
You've had a pretty outstanding career. And so we'll touch on some of the highlights. And then some of the main things is a lot of folks don't know or will know by the end of this interview is Wendy is also a fellow unabashed history buff. And so we'll get a lot into Army history and history of other services throughout the world.
Okay.
I guess we'll start off at the beginning, the basics with everyone. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up? And I guess what influenced you to enjoy the service?
Okay. Well, I grew up in a town called Mandan, North Dakota, and really, I just, I've had a very typical life. My parents and my grandmother still live there in that small town, but when it came time for looking for education, how was I going to pay for this? So was looking at a few different options, and one of my closest friends from starting off in first grade together, my friend Wanda Call, she had enlisted, and she was actually a split op. So she got to go to basic training between her junior and senior year. And so when she came back, it was like, hey, this sounds really cool. Sounds like a great opportunity. And it was, kind of more what I was looking for. So she kind of convinced me to join the Army National Guard. So I enlisted as a 46 Quebec, which is a photojournalist in the North Dakota Army National Guard. So that was pretty. That was probably the first start that I hadn't really had any experience with the military before, and we didn't have ROTC in my high school or anything like that. But it seemed like it was right up my alley. And as soon as I joined, it was just kind of clicked. It was like, I really love this. This is, serving in the military is pretty awesome. And my father had not served. Many of my uncles did through the Vietnam era, but my father hadn't served. So people were quite surprised that I had enlisted. I guess just because I didn't have a father or mother who served, previously. So that was kind of different. My brother also enlisted when it came time for him to graduate a few years after me. So people were kind of surprised that we didn't come from a typical military family. But Yeah, I blame everything on my friend Wanda, who is now a sergeant major. So, I went to her promotion to sergeant major, she came to mine for lieutenant colonel, and we just, like I tell her, all the time, I was like, "25 years ago, man, I blame all this on you."
Oh, at least she's still in. I would have figured if she got out and like, "Oh, you left me here and I'm still doing this and you're not."
Yeah, no, it's pretty funny that we both, like, I think we were the last 2 people that anybody thought would enlist, and then most definitely staying in the military, so it's kind of funny, so all the way
Yeah.
back from 1st grade, and so but that's
So,
that's how I got started. Yeah.
so in your time in the National Guard, I guess what's your most interesting time during this period?
Well, right as soon as I graduated from AIT, well, thinking back in the late 90s, and so there really wasn't like a lot of deployments, right? So, basically when I signed up, I was, told by my recruiter, oh, it's 2 weeks in the summer and one
Mhm.
weekend a month, and that's what you're going to do. But literally the weekend I graduated from AIT, I got a phone call, and I was being deployed to Bosnia with my unit. So like there was not a lot of deployments going on, and somehow I ended up on one, not even, like literally just got off the plane. So it was pretty funny. So
And I'm sure
that was
they
kind of
knew about
surprising.
it before you left.
Actually, no, they didn't. We really didn't probably get orders. From what I understand, it kind of came down like maybe I think I just started AIT when the unit was getting word or getting some hints that they were going to be called
Mhm.
up. So, yeah, they didn't
No,
know.
okay.
So, yeah, so I ended up had about 6 weeks of training, and then we headed off to Europe. First stop was Germany, up in Hohenfels, and it was quite entertaining because we got to Hohenfels, and my unit consisted of a detachment from North Dakota and a detachment from South Dakota,
Mhm.
and everybody was all worried. And we met up with another detachment, which was out of Atlanta, Georgia, and everyone was all worried about the snow and stuff. And we just kind of like laughed at all those people from
Yeah,
Atlanta.
I've I've heard those North Dakota winters are pretty mild.
Yeah. So that was entertaining, and but yeah, I my job as a photojournalist, I ended up working I was stationed at Eagle, Maine, in Tuzla, Bosnia, and went around with different units. And basically, whenever a unit does their coolest training event ever or some sort of exercise, public affairs, generally you'll see them running around, and so that's kind of what we're out there to, either record or take photography, try to
Mhm.
get the story and stuff. So I was a print journalist, so I did a lot of photography and a lot of interviews. So I got to see all the different types of units the Army has actually doing on their coolest days, on
Yeah.
the best days of training. So I got a chance to see what most units do before, I even switched over to become an officer. So
And speaking of that, then can you describe why and how you decided to become an officer?
so while I was on that deployment, I really, really liked what military police did. I did quite a few of my stories were on military police soldiers, and which is kind of funny. Just one of my, I still run into people that I did stories on way
Mhm.
back in the day, and it's pretty funny. One of my sergeants major, when he was a staff sergeant, I pulled up an old story when he was a canine handler, and it was pretty funny. I was like, hey, oh my gosh. So way back in the day, we met before. And really what got me interested in being an officer was, like I said, something clicked when I went to basic training in AIT, and just the military life and was kind of for me. And I was just, looking, at what my opportunities were. And as soon as I got back from the deployment, our new detachment commander that was assigned to us was First Lieutenant Jackie Huber, and she had just come from an MP unit,
Mhm.
and she was taking over as our detachment commander. So she was talking to me about, our ROTC, and a little bit more about military police if I, did become an officer, because public affairs it's a functional area for officers, so I couldn't
Yeah.
do that right out of the bat. So I was definitely interested in that. So she really convinced me to do that. While I was on that deployment, I met a young man who I ended up marrying later. We were married for about 5 years. He was a military policeman as well. And so I ended up moving to Fort Bragg briefly. and then we PCS to Hawaii, and I continued school at the University of Hawaii. So it was, and that's when I started picking up, ROTC classes, and I really enjoyed it. And so then I contracted as a cadet.
So, can you describe, I guess, what does an officer in the military police branch do?
So there's kind of three areas of military police. There's our combat support, which is what we do when we deploy. And a lot of that's like your field stuff and supporting the maneuver units. We also have our criminal investigation division, which is CID. That's your investigations and all the criminal stuff. And then there's the detention and operations and corrections operations side of it. And I've mostly stayed in the combat support or the detention and corrections realms of the military police. So,
Mhm.
and obviously training. So, but go back to that. First Lieutenant Jackie Huber is now Brigadier General Jackie Huber in the North Dakota National Guard. So it's kind of funny. And I had shot her a note last year when I got selected for command, and was just like, "Hey, I don't know if if you're still tracking or whatever,
Mhm.
just, and it was pretty funny. It was just like, look what you started. So along with Wanda and then Lieutenant Huber,
Yeah.
just, yep, that's what they started.
That's
And look
great.
where I am now.
So, what would you consider through all your junior officer time doing those different positions and deploying? I guess what would be you consider your most important leadership learning experience as a company grade officer? Was it a specific event, a specific job, or deploying overseas?
I deployed twice as a platoon leader, both times to Iraq. First time in 2003 for a year, and then the second time we only were home at Fort Hood for about 8 months, and they deployed us back again for another year. So that was not very awesome. A little bit hard on the personal lives of everybody in my unit. That was just it was kind of
Yeah.
rough because we didn't get that full year back in home station before they sent us back for another year. But I would definitely say that that's the piece that was most developmental for me. And I'm still pretty close to some of my original platoon members. So it's kind of funny just running into them, or it's trying to keep track of them on social media and stuff. and
Hmm.
and what's even funnier is one of the first sergeants of my companies was one of my team leaders when I from my platoon leader days. So
That's good.
yeah, so we were actually at one point we're like chew mates, so because it was another female, it was like, "Oh."
Well, MP branch is a lot smaller than like maybe one of the combat arms, right?
Yes, it is. And like I said, a lot of the even those who when I was in public affairs, any people I've done articles on and stuff like that, I still run into those guys too. So it's interesting. So, but yeah, I mean, I remember back in when I was in Bosnia, the reason was really interested in MPs was because, during peacekeeping operations, there wasn't, especially for combat arms, there was a lot of gate guard. Let's just put it that way. I mean,
Hmm.
guarding things and just kind of sitting in one place. Whereas the military policemen were running all over the country. They were working in conjunction with like the local police departments and like the town mayors and stuff like that. And so they really, to me, I saw them being involved in these communities, even deployed, and actually having an impact to what was going on over there. So that's really why, like, I got the interest in MP to start with.
Hmm. Coming back to this topic, since it's Women's History Month, and we're
Yeah.
when we're recording this, you served multiple times in a combat zone during
Hmm.
the period when the Department of Defense policy prohibited women from serving in units whose primary mission was to engage in combat.
Hmm.
So, how would you describe your specific experience as a female officer serving in the Army during this time? I mean, did you feel that there were any additional burdens or challenges you had to overcome?
Not from the military police branch. So military police has been integrated for, I think, as soon as the Women's Army Corps and the WASPs and the WACs,
Hmm.
they got integrated into the military. The MP branch had always been integrated. So I never really felt that. And, there was a lot of great female leaders for me to look up to. I mean, like I said, back then, Lieutenant Huber was definitely someone who I looked up to and was like, hey, that's what I want to be like.
Hmm.
I kind of laugh because I do tell people that, I chose MP because it seemed like the most involved branch because I do enjoy going to the field and doing a lot of tactical exercises, and so that's kind of why I chose that. But this on the same time, I do enjoy the community involvement and even the law enforcement back here at
Hmm.
home domestically, the law enforcement mission or the correctional mission that we hold. So we have a regardless of being deployed or being back home, we always have another mission that we're doing.
Yeah.
So it was a big draw to the MP branch. And as far as deployed, you're right. The first couple years we were deployed, on my first two deployments to Iraq, it was, it was they were talking about policy, national policy about women in combat. Oh, women aren't on the front lines, and it was ridiculous
It's
because
like
here we
too late.
are, like
Yeah.
every single day I'm going out on patrol and literally being shot at and shooting my own weapon back, right? And
Hmm.
but that's not, I wasn't in combat, right?
Yeah.
I was like, this is really what reality is. And so I think it was, I don't know the exact date, but I just remember being on my second deployment, and then finally stating, okay, women are in combat roles. Women are are on the front lines and they're serving everywhere. And it's becoming ridiculous. But,
Yeah.
as you know, it wasn't until 2015 that all branches were open to women in all duty positions. So it's pretty cool in retrospect to look back and see how much has changed just in my career time frame. So
Yeah. Going over that great career that you've had, I guess we could jump to some of the fun, more recent opportunities you've had.
Mhm.
Back in 2015, you had the chance to serve as an exchange officer with the Canadian Army. Can you tell us what unit you served with, where in Canada, and what that job entailed?
Yes. So I got to move up to Ottawa, and I was serving as the G3 for the Canadian Army Military Police Group. And essentially, the G3, it's the Canadian military is got a lot of land mass, but their population's a little bit smaller. So
Hmm.
I like to tell people that they only have a strategic and a tactical level. There's not really a lot of operational level. So even though we were a G3, really the number of military policemen that they had as far as in each of their service components, and that it was about a battalion size for each service component and about a brigade size for their entire joint
Hmm.
military police forces in Canada. Yeah, so I worked up at the Army headquarters, kind of dual hatted as my boss was the provost marshal, along with commanding the MP forces across the 11 provinces. So yeah, so it was a very interesting perspective to get coming from the United States Army, which is so big, has so many troops and so much equipment and so much money and
Yeah.
funding in comparison to some of our allied partners. Let's just put it that way. So getting to Canada, really opened my eyes to how to do things, in some cases better, but how to do things definitely they had to think of their problem sets in different ways,
Hmm.
because I would definitely say in the US Army we're very used to having a lot more funding to get training done, to deploy personnel, to get a lot of the stuff we have. Even our equipment is so much more advanced in most cases. So
Yeah.
it was interesting to see and how to solve problems without just throwing money at it, if that makes sense. That sounds terrible.
It No, it totally. My previous job in San Antonio with Army South, we would work with other countries from South
Mhm,
America, Central America, the Caribbean,
mhm.
and it was almost like an insult to say, "Oh, we don't have the money to do this," and it's just like they look at us like we're crazy. Like, don't even say that. It's so disrespectful. You guys got
Uh-huh.
nothing but money in your army. It's like, but
Yes.
you can't explain to them like, but no, but we only get this much, and then you
Mhm.
can't use that money for this or
Yes, and equipment wise and just, how we support our troops is quite different in the United States as well. So I would definitely say that they were very innovative in how they spent money and how they got their training done.
Hmm.
And so that was really, it was very interesting. I had a great time in Canada. Met some fantastic people, and it's kind of funny. I mean, I'm still I have a Tuesday night Zoom call with my Canadian friends. When I was there, I joined the triathlon team, the service unit Ottawa.
Hmm.
The Canadian Forces had a triathlon team there, and so I joined them. And about once a year, I go do a race. I sign up for a triathlon race with them, and we all go race together. And so it's kind of funny. There's all these Canadians, and they're all wearing their Canadian kit, and I'm like outfitted in red, white, and blue, and I'm just the odd duck with them. But every year they still invite me to at least one race, and the last one we got to do was October 2019. We did a Super Frog race down in Coronado,
Hmm.
California. And so that's the last time we got to race together. And we had planned to race in 2020 together, but obviously that didn't happen.
Yeah.
But this year, hopefully, fingers crossed, we're supposed to all go to Cozumel, Mexico in November. So we're all training for it. We have everything's planned. We'll see if the world lets us go to Mexico in
Yeah.
November. But I
Um,
mean, they're a great group of people, and it's so like, it's awesome to just really work with and have met and built lasting friendships that even after I've left, they're still calling me, still texting me, still Zoom
yeah.
calls, so it's pretty neat.
A bunch of times had the chance to work with the coalition. It's basically, the onesies and twosies. They're the exchange officer on our primarily American staff. I mean, even though they speak English or as one
Yeah.
of their official languages in Canada, what cultural challenges do you think you ran into during your tour?
Well, yes. So most of the office I worked in was mostly francophones, so that was pretty entertaining. And Google Translate does not
Does
work
not work.
well when you're trying to translate like a police report. So I would not suggest that, because you know how it like switches like the verbs, the subjects, the nouns, all that around
Yeah.
with the foreign language. And so the funniest example was I got a sexual assault report from one of our units in Quebec, and I was trying to, like, nobody else was around. I was just me sitting in the office, and I was like, "Oh, let me try to Google Translate this real quick so I can try to figure it out." Well, unfortunately, it flipped the subject and the victim, so it does that make sense?
Yeah.
It was like,
Oh boy.
"Oh." So the way it kinda came out once I translated it was like the victim sexually assaulted the subject. So, which was, it in retrospect, it wasn't a big deal, but because like right away somebody caught it and was like, "Where did you get this information?" And I was just talking to my boss, and he's like,
Yeah.
"What?"
Did they
He's like, "Let me see that." And he's like, "No, that wasn't
did
a good
they take
translation."
away your report writing privileges after that?
No, it was like, fortunately, like I said, it didn't get very far. It was just me talking to the boss and kind of briefing him on something that needed to go upstairs to the commanding general. So before it went to the general, he was just like, "What you're saying isn't making sense. Where
Yeah.
did you get this information?" So he checked it. So after that, I always tried to find, if it was a report from Quebec, I always had to make sure I got it checked from somebody who actually spoke French. So.
Do you have any other funny faux pas stories you'd care to share?
Yes. So I did attempt when I first got there to take some French classes, and it wasn't going very well because there's so many like similarities to I know just enough of Spanish to be like dangerous and get myself in trouble.
Hmm.
And unfortunately Spanish and French, while written differently, are, in a way they're similar. There's some words. And so the one that got me into trouble one day that was quite amusing was I was volunteering at this event, and it was someone's birthday. And so there was this birthday cake that we had shared, and there was still like half the cake on the table behind me. And so I'm working at the booth, and this little boy comes up to me, and he keeps talking about, in French, he's talking about the gâteau behind me, and I knew he wanted to eat. So he kept saying, like, I want to eat. And what I was thinking gâteau is, cat. And I was like, why do you want to eat my cat? And the lady next to me just starts laughing. She's like, do you know any Spanish? And I was like, not a lot, but a little. But and she's like, gâteau in French is cake. And she's like, he wants some of the cake behind you. Give him a piece of cake. And I'm like, oh, it was goofy. It was a funny moment. It made me laugh. But other than that, like, the only French I really ended up leaving with was, so in Quebecois, their curse words are all religious words.
Oh.
So like tabernacle, they would be saying, oh, tabernacle, chalice, or sacrament, or like baby Jesus would be a terrible like swear word. So I'm not joking. Like my boss, also at the time was a francophone, my first commander. He would drop the F-bomb like every other sentence and wouldn't blink an eye. But then all of a sudden he would be like super angry. That's when you knew he was really angry. He'd be like, oh, sacrament. And you're like, and then he'd be like, oh my God, I cursed. I'm so sorry. And it was like, you just dropped 4 F-bombs, but you couldn't say sacrament. Like, it was so funny. And so, of course, everybody in my office, I was like, I was always plotting. I was like, I'm going to learn to curse like you guys. So, because I'm going to go back to the States and people are just going to think I'm this weird girl that says religious terms randomly rather than inappropriately dropping F-bombs. So that was, yeah. So I did have that for a little bit when I first left Canada. I was trying to, say, tabernacle, chalice, sacrament. Yeah, it was pretty funny. But they said it wasn't, they said it sounded weird when I tried to curse.
They set you up. That's what it was.
So, of course, I mean, that's what you learn, right? You learn the curse words of any language, right?
Yeah, it's a way to get along with people. I know what you're talking about now.
Yeah.
So going back, I guess since you had your history nerd card in your wallet or your purse, did you learn anything fascinating about Canadian Army history while you were there?
Yeah. So to me, I really enjoyed my time there in the aspect of really digging deeper into the Canadians' history. So one of the things I thought was kind of fascinating was that, in the US, we kind of think that World War II was really the war that kind of developed us as a nation as to where we are today.
Mm-hmm.
That was, as far as our military history, we really kind of, at least in my experience, it feels like we go back to World War II a lot.
It's like our glory time.
Yeah. But for them, the Canadians, they really go back to World War I. And that's because, they were founded as a nation, 1867. So the first war that they actually fought together as Canadians and represented was World War I. They were representing their country because before that they were either British or French. So now here they are as actual Canadians. And it really formed them as a nation. And the call up and, getting sent over to Europe and, their support, in France and in Belgium,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot of ties to World War I is really where they always go back to. And then, fascinating to, the In Flanders Fields, the poem by John McCrae, as we know, it was actually a Canadian officer, and that his poem is what kind of caused the poppy to be adopted by the military almost worldwide as the symbol of remembrance. And I would definitely say that poem is actually my favorite poem of any poetry that's out there. And it's just beautiful to me. And, you think about, all those we've served with and the fields of poppies that sprouted up after on these old battlefields. It's just kind of crazy. And it's such a beautiful symbol to me. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so that was one of the things that was kind of cool to dig into a little bit more. And trust me, when it comes to Remembrance Day, which is their Veterans Day, right? There's poppies everywhere. I mean, it's pretty amazing. And it's their Remembrance Day actually was the 2 years that I spent there for Remembrance Day was a really cool event. For them, it's not just a day off, it's truly everybody who's currently serving or anybody who formerly serves tries to get into their uniform, and you go out to these different legion posts or different military cemeteries, and they have a service, and everybody attends, or it's expected. That's what you do that day. So you go to some sort of service or event for Remembrance Day. And so I got to go, since I lived in downtown Ottawa, just walked a few blocks to their tomb of their unknown soldier.
Hmm.
That is right there. That's across the street from their parliament. And I mean, the streets are just like hundreds of thousands of people, and it's just they're like blocked off. It's a huge crowds. It's really cool. They do quite the events, and then afterwards, everybody goes to their different messes, because the Canadians still have their mess system. So they have the
Hmm.
enlisted mess, they have their officers mess, and then you go to the officers mess and you kind of do like a social and stuff like that. And you have a nice meal together and stuff. So, or the other option is to go to local schools, and you kind of the schools will do a little service for Remembrance Day, and then
Yeah.
the veterans there are supposed to share their story and stuff like that. And so very similar. So I mean, but that's the expectation. It's not a day off. It's the expectation as you participate in Remembrance
Yeah.
Day ceremonies. And I thought that was really awesome to be part of. And I had a great time both years that I was there, and just getting to be in downtown Ottawa, like I said, right across from Parliament. And really, they were very moving ceremonies. So very
That's great.
cold though.
Hey, but you're from North Dakota. It can't be that much colder, right?
Yeah, I think that the second year I was there, it was like, I wanna say it was the high that day was maybe 10 degrees, and there was a good wind going, and you remember the trench coat that you're supposed to wear over your ASUs? It's not
Yes.
very warm.
Uh,
So it was
it's just for show.
interesting.
It's just for show.
Yeah.
It's for the
Yeah.
rain.
Yeah, it wasn't raining, so I had, like, stuffed, like, another jacket liner, like an old school
Yeah.
field jacket liner was underneath, because I didn't have the appropriate. I don't think, does anybody have the appropriate, like, liner that's supposed to button
Uh,
into
I
the
don't
old,
know. I never did. You could
So, yeah.
save a few bucks. You need it.
It was cold. But that was some of my favorite parts about, my time in Canada.
After your awesome gig with the Canadian Army, you were selected to be a professor of military science for an ROTC battalion.
Yep.
Where were you assigned, and what did that job entail?
So I was assigned to the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point, and we had three other universities that were also part of my program. So like draw a line across Upper Wisconsin. So it was Stevens Point, Eau Claire, Stout, and River Falls. And those were the four universities of which that my program was part of. So I spent a lot of time the last 3 years driving back and forth across the state. And I do appreciate definitely moving back down here to Missouri, because I don't have to deal with the weather as much as I was the last 3 years. So that was a lot of driving and a lot of really bad snowstorms.
Yeah, jeez.
So each year we graduated and commissioned about 20 to 29 cadets, and excuse me, officers. What was cool about our program, even though we were considered a little bit smaller, there's about 244 programs across the nation. And every year still ended up right around the top 10%. So they kind of took an average of where the cadets, when they commissioned, when they go through the accessions process,
Hmm.
where they kind of ended up. And in my program, even though it was small, routinely was in the top 10% nationwide. So
Oh.
that was pretty awesome to have kind of that caliber for, a bunch of small schools in northern Wisconsin. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was great. It was probably one of my favorite jobs was to be teaching cadets. And the day to day, they have several times a week. They had PT on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays in the morning, and then they had a couple classes throughout the week, which were military science classes, which we taught them the basic soldiering tasks and leadership and things like that. And then they had once a week we had a lab, which was where they learn like kind of more the hands-on portion, like learning how to do battle drills and some of the tactical stuff. And then a couple times a semester, we would have weekends that we would go training, so they could learn how to do stuff like land navigation. We would luckily Fort McCoy wasn't that far away. We go down there and they could shoot rifles. We could do some of our stick slayings and a lot of the good training. So got a chance to definitely make some winter warriors out of those cadets in Wisconsin. But yeah, it was a great experience. And day to day, I had a lot of direct interface interaction with them, and that was really my favorite part. Was just
Yeah.
they'd knock on the door midweek and it's just somebody be like, "Hey, I was working on this operations order and I don't understand how to do this one part." And so we'd sit down and we'd break down the operations order and learn how to do things, and it was just great. It was a lot of fun.
So, we're younger middle age, I guess you can say. I mean, what are some things you learned about the younger, in quotation marks, the younger generation while teaching military history courses to your cadets?
Yep. So that was one of the things I got to be trained to, and they sent me down to Leavenworth to the CAC has the Army University Press now, which is they train one of their classes that they have is to teach military history. And so the historians that we have at Leavenworth turn around and teach all these ROTC instructors and some military historians to how to turn around and teach, right? So so that was a great course that I got to go to at Leavenworth. It was like a 3-week course, and it was just like massive amounts of reading and turning around and kind of reteaching this information to the rest of our classmates. And how do you, the big thing is so we all cadets have to take a military history course as well before they can commission. So, and not all the universities necessarily have the equivalent of a class that would be appropriate for that. So that's why they teach all these assistant professors in military science or professors in military science and how to teach these classes. So that was one of the cool ones that I really enjoy history. So I went ahead and I definitely signed up for that right away and started teaching military history. And how do you, and the question is like half of your cadets are not going to be into this, right? It's just not their.
That's horrible.
I know, right?
What's wrong with kids nowadays?
So it's how do you catch their interest, and how do you say, "Hey, biology major, like, this is why you need to learn military history." And so really it was finding the, what's going to catch their attention and why do they, explaining the why and why do they need to understand what happened and where our army came from and how we've developed into the army we are today. So once I kind of explained that, I mean, there was a couple textbooks that were really super dry. And I did make them read, but I was like, look, you just need to sit down and skim through these chapters. I'm not expecting you to memorize it, but you guys have to come each day and you have to have topics of discussion, because if you're not discussing this with me and you're not bringing up questions or talking to each other, then I'll just do a quiz. So they would all like write certain things down so they would be able to talk through. But luckily, like, for my class sizes, they were able to talk enough to get through the semester.
Did they ever bring up like any alternative ways to learn the material?
So yes. And so that was something I would do as well was, there was always like a reading assignment. They had to pick up like a military history book and do like a book review. But one of the things I also added was a movie review. So I would go through and like gave them this huge list of like acceptable military or movies. And I'd usually sneakily find out which ones they've already seen. So they had to watch a new movie, at least a new movie to them. And so they had to do a movie review that has backfired on them, which was super funny. I don't know if you remember when Dunkirk came out. Harry Styles, that young actor and singer, was in it. And so I had several of my young female cadets who decided they wanted to watch Dunkirk because Harry Styles was in it. And I was laughing so hard because they came in the next day and were like super bummed. They're like, there's like no talking in this movie. And I was like, yeah, it's, it's about a siege, and they were like, and Harry Styles is in there, but it was very brief. He wasn't, it was so funny. So they had watched it for this one actor, and I'm like laughing, and it was just like, well, what did you get out of this movie?
I got my wife a while back when World War Z came out. I was like,
Yeah.
hey, you want to watch a Brad Pitt movie tonight? Oh yeah, I'm always down for Brad Pitt. 2 minutes in, she's like, what the hell is this? I'm like, it's Brad Pitt's in it. You can ask what kind of movie it was. Just say it's Brad Pitt.
The other good one that I had was, oh God, what's the Russian nuclear plant that exploded again? The name of that?
Chernobyl.
Yes, Chernobyl. So there was that good series that came out like 2 years ago.
Yeah, on
If you remember
HBO.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was talking about that, and because I think we were in the class, we were somewhere in like the Cold War, and I was like, hey, this series, I just watched this. It's really depressing, but it's really good. And I was like, this is on, and so apparently and I told all my cadets, oh yeah, you should watch this. It's good. So this one cadet, she comes in, and her roommate actually rats her out. It's another cadet in the program. Roommate comes in and rats her out, and she was like, yep, she came in. Madeline was saying that she started watching this movie and she thought it was the one you told her to watch, but she didn't think it was right when the zombies started eating people. And so apparently there's a horror movie out there called Chernobyl Diaries. She just looked up Chernobyl, and so that's what she got. So she apparently got through this whole thing and like walks up to her roommate and was like, I don't think this is right. And she's like, yeah, no. But I mean, I would search for things, and like now like the cadets online YouTube videos and stuff like that. So I definitely used a lot of oversimplified and drunk history videos. I would put those on just to like, few minutes of those videos here and there, and then we discuss and stuff. And so that's kind of what I did. And I subjected my niece and nephew to them actually, as I was trying to like write my classes and, kind of prepare for classes. So if it kept my niece and nephew's attention, I was like, the college students can pay attention to this.
Yeah.
They were like 9 and 11.
Yeah. It's just their generation. My kids are the same way. They just want to show us like everything on YouTube that they've been watching.
It was fun though. I mean, so they would end up finding different little clips or different little, trying to get them to do a little bit of research or look up things versus, and that's what I was trying to get them to, is like, if this textbook is terrible, it is really dry and boring. And so they would find different little blips here and there, the way that they do research now with the digital age, right? Yeah. And they would bring that in as a discussion point, which was great. So, I mean, we are covering this period. So let's say we were covering the Civil War, and so what we did for the Civil War was the discussion with, do we take down or leave up Civil War monuments, right? That had become, hot business since 2017. So I made them research that and do a debate essentially. So they divided up in groups, and I was like, hey, go ahead and debate it. They learned more about the Civil War by trying to research that than they would have just reading the textbook. That was pretty dry. So, because they have to dig in, and of course, if you give them a reason to argue about one way or the other, then of course they're going to try to find all these reasons why, right?
So
that was one of my favorite assignments, and I've had former cadets tell me, they're like, yeah, I love that assignment, and because I made them, when we split the group, do you tear these down or do you leave up these statues and monuments? And, I was like, you guys, you have to learn how to debate and, have arguments with each other, and, that are civil and very still professional. Can't just be and
informed.
Yeah. And you can't just be like, your situation's dumb, your decision's dumb because you're ugly. Like that doesn't make any sense. And I kind of feel in the world today, that's what we've resorted to, a lot of politics and what's going on. It's just a lot of name calling. And instead it was interesting to watch these cadets trying to learn how to form an opinion. Here's the facts that support my opinions. And this is why I feel this way. And then I'd actually see, at least every single time we did this assignment, there'd be at least one or two cadets that would switch sides. Like they would be like, oh, you're right, I never thought about it in that perspective. So I was like, there's not really a wrong answer as long as you can argue your point effectively and professionally. And so that's the lost art for these kids, is being able to talk professionally and understanding that definitely in the professional world, you're not going to be having the same opinion as a lot of people you work with, right? Yep. So, and that was great. I really liked that one. And like I said, I think they ended up digging into a lot more of the Civil War, I think, than they would have otherwise. It's all my tricks.
So in your current job, your unit trains new enlisted soldiers,
Mhm.
basic training in AIT or just basic training?
It's basic training in AIT, so
NIT.
military police, yep.
You want to give a little insight about that, what you guys do with them, and then how that differs a little bit on what you just explained on how you went about training officers in ROTC?
Yeah. So for ROTC, I have as an officer, because we're creating officers. I really enjoyed that because they're essentially those cadets now officers are my legacy. In the next 3 to 5 years, I'll be retiring myself and passing the torch off. I know there's this great group of young junior officers out there that are I have no qualms about passing off the torch to them. I
Hmm.
think they're fantastic. So coming down here down to Fort Leonard Wood to be the battalion commander for a one station unit training for basic training in AIT for military policemen. I don't necessarily get that same direct contact and development that I used to with the cadets. So it's the drill sergeants, it's their duty and their position to direct contact and train the new soldiers coming in the army. So my impact here is more on the cadre and the drill sergeants. So for them to become successfully and to enable them to be the best instructors they possibly can. So that's, I have very indirect contact with, privates that are, when I go to training events and stuff like that. I do try to get out to a lot of their different events, a lot of the ranges, a lot of like the Warrior Tower, the obstacle courses. I try to get out at least to a different event every single day
Hmm.
and see some of the training because that's really what we're here to do. But I'm not the one providing that direct training anymore. It's the drill
Okay.
sergeants. So enabling them by making sure that we plan training effectively, we've resourced it, and even just supporting the cadre themselves, making sure that they're paid correctly and their administrative stuff is taken care of, that they're getting the schools that they need in order to development. That's my role here, and that's how it kind of differs between RTC, since RTC is there to make officers, and here I'm the commander of a unit that's developing brand new soldiers. So that's kind of the difference.
That's good. Like you say, you get to put a stamp on the future.
Yeah. And the other difference too is in ROTC, I was there for 3 years. And so you have the entire school year with these cadets. And it's so why I kind of enjoyed it a little bit more. I mean, I love being commander, but why I really enjoyed the ROTC assignment was just I got to see them develop. Like it's kind of funny because right now I have several of my former cadets who were sophomores when I first got to the university. They were sophomores. They're here right now going through BOLIC, either engineer, chemical, or MP BOLIC
Hmm.
as, young officers. I've gotten to watch them over 3 years develop, and, just see where they're going now is just fantastic. And, like I said, I had more development ties to them than I necessarily get. I spend a lot of time with my lieutenants in the battalion now, and my young company commanders, the captains, but
Hmm.
it's not the same.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
it's reverse. It's the drill
Yeah.
sergeants have that opportunity to
Mhm.
to live and mold
Yeah.
the soldiers. Well, as we get near the end, this is a military history podcast. So
Yeah.
I'd like to close out, I guess, a couple of topics. Out of all the museums you've had a chance to visit, what military history museums would be in your top three?
Okay. You are you gonna tell me your top 3 then?
I can. Wow, whoa, you got to turn that around on me. Wait a minute, I'm the
I'll
host.
tell you mine. I'll give you a moment to think too. So,
Okay, go
the
ahead.
Canadian War Museum in Ottawa is probably my favorite museum to go to. I never got bored, and every time anybody came up to visit me, I took them through it, and it was fantastic and very interesting. Probably the next one would be like the National Infantry Museum at Fort Benning.
Hmm.
One of my closest friends actually got married there. They rented it out. It was kind of a cool
Really
wedding.
committed to the cause.
Yeah, yeah, she's an engineer officer and her husband's infantry, so but they were stationed at Benning at the time, but yeah. So, it was a really cool event, and it was kinda cool because, like, there's the time when everybody's taking pictures and you're like, "Okay, what are we were milling around waiting for, like, the dinner to start." So, we
Hmm.
got to wander around the museum, so that was pretty cool. And then probably my 3rd would be, I think, the World War I Museum in Kansas City. I think that's a fantastic museum. Have you been to that one?
I have. That's actually on one of my lists. My
Okay.
top 3 lists. You
Yeah.
took some of my thunder.
I think that one's awesome, and then I think, for honorable mention, the Incheon Landing Museum in Korea, just outside of Seoul. It's not actually it kind of overlooks Incheon, the harbor
Mhm.
there. So it was a kind of a it was a little cheesy in some ways because but it was really it was neat to go there. So, I don't know, have you ever been stationed in Korea?
I have. That's
Yeah.
as I move into my top 3, that my top 1 would probably be the Korean War Museum in Seoul. I
Okay.
think that's what it was. Uh,
Mhm.
when it went down there, I mean, I don't even think we went through it all. It's just
Yeah.
amazing because, Korea, their timeline
Mhm.
is in the thousands of years, not just the couple hundred.
Yeah, they had, like, the wooden warboat and everything.
Mhm.
Yeah. That
And
one
then they
was
kinda
that was
had, like,
amazing.
that little memorial where they had, like, all their war dead from the Korean
Mhm.
War in those books out front. I mean, I
Yeah.
thought that was fantastic. My number 2 would probably be the World War One Museum, in
Okay.
Kansas City. And then it's probably a tie between for my 3rd, I would kinda lean towards the Air Force Museum at Wright-Patterson.
Okay.
I had a chance to go there on during a TDY, and a couple of guys that went, I don't thi we didn't get through all of it. It was that big,
Yeah.
and so hopefully the new Army Museum over there at Belvoir will be able to compete with that.
Yeah, so, like me, like, go TDY and or just traveling, and you're like, "Let's go to a museum."
It's like,
You have to
"Boring." Like, "I'll go by
you're with the
myself."
right group of friends when they're like, "Come on, let's go to this museum." And they're like, "Okay, cool." And then you're like, "Then we'll go have beer," afterward. Yeah, that's kinda how I go travel and explore places. I go places and do races, and then I usually try to look up if there's any museums in the
Yeah,
area.
and that's the same thing, when we're in Texas, we went down I think we did a spring break down at, San Padre Island,
Mhm.
and, the kids were like, "Oh, what else are we gonna go see?" It's like, "Oh, well, since we're right next door, the sand the battlefield of this and that from the Mexican War," like, oh.
I mean, we all have our things, and so,
Yeah,
like I told the cadets, it's you just gotta
yeah,
tell your kids that,
yeah.
we don't know where we came from and how we ended up being this way today if we don't understand and look back at history, right? So,
Yeah. Is there any topic that we might have missed that you wanna bring up before we finish up?
what's your favorite war movies?
My
Military
favorite war
movies.
movies.
Yeah.
For I don't know, let's see. I guess the top one would be Saving Private Ryan.
Okay.
Just it's modern and, I've
Yeah.
seen it, and I think for me it was special because it's one of the few that I actually got to see with my dad since he passed away a few years ago, and my parents divorced when I was younger, so I didn't spend a whole bunch of time with him growing up,
Okay.
but we got to see that together. And, his dad and, my grandfather was in World War II, so that was
Mhm.
kind of like a bonding thing for us. For, like, realism of, I think, just basic, you know it may not be, Academy Award winning movie, but just of the interactions and the perspective of the soldiers, I think my second favorite would be Hamburger Hill.
Okay.
I think that just gives a real good look on just a infantry, company at the time,
Mhm.
in one of probably the worst battles of Vietnam.
Mhm.
Um, and then honorable mention, I don't know. There's a whole bunch, I'm kind of in
Mhm.
everything, but I think the most current one I saw that I really enjoyed was the last 2 I saw, were 1917 was pretty amazing
Mhm.
as a movie, like, just technical, the way it was filmed and the story is amazing movie, and then I enjoyed The Five Bloods, the Spike Lee one that came out last year.
I haven't seen that one yet. I need to.
It's a pretty good one.
Okay.
But what about
Yeah.
yourself?
So and the reason I asked was because it's kind of funny when we talked about when I would make the cadets pick movies and stuff like that. And we forget that, a lot of these movie clips they haven't ever seen because these movies
Yeah,
are now old, like
older than
classics.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's funny. So I was referring to certain things, like I was referring to like Band of Brothers scenes, and they were like just staring at me funny. It's like, oh Jesus,
Wow.
fine. So I had to like bring in like, make them all
That's
like watch the
that's
Band of
old to
Brothers.
them. Holy smokes.
Yeah, it is. You think about it. So yeah, so really my top 3 kind of came out all about the same time when we were like probably our senior year of college or just commissioned as lieutenant. So Black Hawk Down, and I remember
Mm-hmm.
going to that like with a bunch of my classmates when it first came out in the theaters, and it was pretty cool. I think Ivan and his wife Courtney, I think they had just left Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
I know you interviewed them last week, so
Oh yes, a couple
um,
episodes ago. Yep.
yeah, so like so like I think they had just left. I don't think they were with us. Like a whole group of us as cadets all went saw Black Hawk Down together, and it was like one of my favorite memories from being in ROTC was going to that with my classmates. We Were Soldiers would probably be my
Mm-hmm.
second. The book is fabulous, but I do think
I
it's
know
one of those.
I can't even imagine them trying to fit in the Albany situation.
Mhm.
That's a movie and all in itself.
I know, but like as far as getting it into a movie, I just thought they did a fantastic job.
Yeah.
And the last maybe number 3 would be like the Band of Brothers series.
Mm-hmm.
Just that was just such a good one. And then how about some of the old school ones that you have out there, honorable mention, like Patton or Green Berets. I remember growing up and like my parents were watching those. Platoon. I remember watching that with my
Platoon.
dad.
Yeah.
I was like really young, and I was like kind of strange that my parents let me watch that.
My daughter, like during the quarantine this year,
Yeah.
at some point, it's like a Saturday. I think I was off work, and it was just like, oh look, Apocalypse Now's on TV. Hey, I told my oldest daughter, I'm like, come on, come watch this. She's like a movie buff.
Yeah.
But she doesn't like watching movies with us. She like,
Yeah.
but then she'll watch it on her own and want to talk about it. It's like, why don't you sit down and talk? So she
Yeah.
sat down, watch, and then like later on, it's like, oh, the guy was in the Mighty Ducks. I was like, it's like, like no, that's his dad. That's how old this movie is. Thanks for joining me today. I mean, it's great to catch up, and I appreciate you
No
doing this
problem.
for me.
Yeah, happy
And
women's military history or Women's History Month, excuse me. Yeah.
yes. So unfortunately, when this comes out, I have it scheduled to come out in April in a few weeks.
Okay.
So it's just gonna miss. But no, I think you had a great story, and like you said, you're making a small but important contribution to the future of the Army.
Oh,
And I know,
thank you.
just so you know, I deployed with 2 of your previous lieutenants from Fort Bliss, and once they knew that I knew you, they had nothing but amazing things to say about you. So
Which one did you get? Which ones?
I had Kerr and Felder.
Oh, yes.
No, it's like they were kind of like our junior officers that kind of just that hung with us when we were deployed to Jordan, and
Yeah.
great kids, and
Yeah.
great people to be around.
So Kerr commanded in Korea, and then now he's in Canada, but he's in Petawawa, which is like 2 hours from Ottawa.
Mhm.
2 hours from anything. Let's just put it that way. Let's like being stationed at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin is bigger than Petawawa.
Oh wow.
When he got the assignment, he like shot me a note. He's like, "I'm so excited." And I was like, "You do know where you're going, right?"
It's Canada though.
Yeah. But one of my officers here, one of my lieutenants here, Kerr was his company commander,
Mhm.
and he just, oh my God, it was so funny because he's this young lieutenant, and he's telling me all about this, his former company commander, and he gets here to Fort Leonard Wood, and I was like, oh my God, I know him, and he was just like, he was the best officer, and I'm like, yes, he was great, yeah, and Raquel, she's a firecracker.
Yeah, she is, man. She's kind of like you, man. She is all athlete. She can't like slow her down for nothing. I'm like, I think we got talked into doing like a half marathon, and I was like not gonna do it
Mhm.
until our Marine colonels were shaming us into doing it, and so
Yeah.
me and her, on like no training. Maybe we did like an extended run here or there for like 2 weeks beforehand. Like
Yeah.
didn't train up for it at all.
Yeah.
And she was my running buddy. We made it through, and yeah, she's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I got to stretch, man. I got to stretch for like half hour afterwards. I'm gonna be dying if I don't do this." She's like ready to go again.
Yeah, man, you got some great MP officers working for you. That's
Yeah.
great.
If you enjoy listening to our show, please take a few moments to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast player. This simple step is the best way for you to help new listeners find the show. Join us next time as we continue to share stories from America's military past.